The following video is a proposal for a new approach to risk and control self-assessments. We will start with a bit of background. Regulators require that banks employ risk and control self-assessments or RCSAs, as their primary tool in assessing inherent and residual operational risks. Beyond some very high-level statements, the regulators have not provided any guidance on how exactly this should be done. Of all of the operational risk programs, universally, RCSAs consumes by far the most amount of time from both the first and second line. Anyone involved in the process can agree that despite the large commitment to this initiative over long periods of time, this tool has failed us in identifying significant issues, and as well, frontline executives tend not to see a lot of value in the process. At best, it is documenting what everyone already knows. At worst, it is a check-the-box exercise that doesn't even capture all of the known risks. For the foreseeable future, the banking industry is under pressure to reduce expenses. In this environment, it is hard to justify a program like the RCSA process, that not only fails to identify and prevent large losses, but also consumes a large amount of the bank's resources at the same time. From a business perspective, this is not sustainable. Meet Annie. She is tired of continuing with a process which doesn't add value to her organization, and ultimately falls short of what the regulators intended. Annie began to look for alternatives to the current RCSA method, and here is what she discovered. Annie realized that risk assessments have been successfully carried out for decades in the evaluation of credit risk. If you think assessing operational risk is difficult, managing credit is an order of magnitude more challenging. With operational risk, your processes and people are a much more known quantity. Compare this with a total stranger and their organization. How do you give credit to someone you just met and don't know if you can trust? Even for those you do trust, how do you guarantee they will pay you back? How do you measure the risk in a way that you can compare two completely different clients? Despite the challenges, for the first 10,000 years or so, credit was useful, but imperfect. This all changed in 1956. That year, an engineer and a statistician launched a small tech company from their San Francisco apartment. That company came to be known as FICO. Before FICO, credit bureaus relied in part on gossip culled from people's landlords, neighbors, and local grocers. It's hard to overstate how revolutionary FICO really was. What Annie learned was that research supporting this view goes back to the 1950s when famed psychologist, Peter Meehan, discovered that simple statistical models could outperform experts in almost every field. Since Peter's initial findings, he had completed nearly 150 studies and found that simple models could provide a better prediction than a human expert in every field from medicine, to politics, to banking. The problem is that although experts can hold a vast amount of detailed knowledge, the human brain is not well equipped to turn that information into reliable forecasts. When lenders adopted statistical approaches in their lending decisions, they began to experience a number of benefits which included a significant savings in the time and labor to complete an assessment and make a decision, improvements in identifying risks sooner, and improvements in the client experience. This was exactly the outcomes Annie was looking for. Annie discovered that the underlying methodology in assessing credit risk began with a set of fundamental factors. For example, this could be the 4 C's of credit, which are capital, collateral, character, and capacity. For each of the factors, a set of quantifiable metrics were identified, which, even if they weren't perfect, could at least provide a proxy of the borrower's alignment to each of the 4 C's. For capital, the measures include cash, investments, properties, and patents. For collateral, the measures include property, vehicles, equipment, and personal assets. For character, the measures include size, number of employees, and media coverage. And for capacity, the measures include cash flow, debt, and unused lines of credit. Once the metrics were identified, a statistician is able to relatively simply apply algebra to the data and create a formula to generate a credit risk score. Annie knew that although the risk was different, a very similar approach could be used to score operational risks. For example, several decades ago, Donald Cressy, a well-known criminologist, developed the fraud triangle. Like the 4 C's of credit, the 3 elements of the fraud triangle provide the key factors required for fraud to occur, that is opportunity, pressure, and rationalization. Like with the credit risk approach, all that was needed was to identify key metrics that could provide a measure for each of the 3 factors in the fraud triangle. Once the measures were identified, a statistician could simply create a formula to score the risk. The development of risk measures is repeated for each of the operational risk types, and the results consolidated into a single operational risk score for each business, similar to a credit risk score. With the new process in place, ANI sees the RCSA's discussions becoming much more productive as they move away from a checkbox exercise to a conversation focused on the risk. Like in credit risk, developing a scoring model for the RCSA would allow us to complete assessments with less cost, faster, and provide an improved assessment of the risk. To demonstrate the approach, our proposed next step is to develop one model for one risk and compare it to the existing process in assessing that particular risk.